Alright, how's it going, y'all? Today we are back in Synology's DSM-7 beta, and I'm really excited because we're going to be playing with a really fun feature that I think a few people will get a lot of great use out of, and that is Synology's new hybrid share. So basically what hybrid share is it is a share that is both on the cloud and on your local NAS, which is downloaded on demand based off of how much usage you give it and what files you're using. So this is really not necessarily probably going to be used for a lot of home users. Quite frankly, local storage is cheap enough, but it can still act as a really good offsite backup essentially. You can use hybrid share to basically be your backup. It's not a perfect backup, it is not a true backup, but for the average home user, it's actually not that bad of an idea, though the pricing is a little bit more expensive. It's the regular C2 pricing. But where this is going to be really good, honestly, is for enterprise users and people who have maybe like 50 different sites across the United States who really don't need that much storage at every single one of the sites, but would like all the sites to have access to all the data together. And so this is where this is really going to come in. Essentially what you do is you have a hybrid share program across your entire company. Then every single site will have its own NAS. And basically, it will have a connection to the exact same hybrid share cloud. There will be one Synology cloud that is over all of them, but then every single one of them will download on demand, essentially the files that are used most often, and then sync them up. This kind of combines the advantages of the cloud with the advantages of local storage. The cloud, it's everywhere. Everybody can be contacting it, everybody can be editing it all together. And then local storage, the great advantage is speed. If you have something locally, you can access it so much faster, which is incredibly important. And so if you can go into Synology's ecosystem like this and really spread this out over a bunch of different sites, I think it could honestly be incredibly valuable. Alright, so now let's talk about how hybrid share works. Hybrid share works by basically being a portal to the cloud. You basically go into DSM-7 and you connect it to your cloud. You then say, how many gigabytes of data would you like always synced on this NAS? It can be 10 gigabytes, it can be 10 terabytes. It doesn't really matter. Then over time, Synology will basically download that many gigabytes of data that are used most often and keep them local. Then if you ask for a file that is not local, that is not downloaded from the cloud, it will download it and give it to you. It can be a little slow if it's a huge file and you don't have that fast of download speed, but basically that file will then be local for you because Synology will first download it, then give it to you. And so that's where it really comes into play, is really being this hybrid architecture. And so that way you're not really restricting your bandwidth because your entire team is always downloading the same files from the cloud. It is basically this group cache that everybody uses together, and so it can really decrease bandwidth usage. Instead of having everybody on your team downloading these files, the files are downloaded once to the central Synology and uploaded as changes occur. And so it's a lot more efficient from that manner and can also give you significantly faster performance, especially if you were something like a video editor, though I don't necessarily think that this pricing model and these feature sets work for that. But if you're somebody like a video editor, you could basically edit video from a petabyte of data that your company has, and it will basically just be downloaded to your local Synology and be able to get local speeds to it, which is a huge promise if it can all work out. And so we're going to go ahead and try this out in Synology's DSM-7 beta. Alright, so as we can see right here, I've just logged into Synology's DSM-7 beta, and setting this up is actually incredibly easy. We just go on into Control Panel, Shared Folder, and just click Create. And here we have an additional option. We have the regular Create Shared Folder, but we also have Mount Hybrid Share Folder, and that's what we're going to do. Currently with the beta, you get 1 terabyte of access for free. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do this. You're going to have to sign in with your account, and so my screen's going to get blurry for some reason. And so then after that, we'll be able to select it. Alright, so now I've gone ahead and signed in, and basically it says, hey, this is the hybrid share beta program. It's beta right now, though I think this interface is going to be very similar to when it's full release, though it is not going to be free. And it's going to say, you've got 1 terabyte of storage, or however much storage your plan is paid for. And I'm going to say, I agree. And now it's incredibly easy. So basically, the C2 storage network has everything encrypted. So we're going to make up an encryption key. And once again, it's just like all of the other encryption on Synology. If you lose the key, you can't decrypt the files. But it's good they say this and really send it home so you don't accidentally lose this key and say, where's my data, Synology? Because they can't get it back either. And it's going to automatically download that file for us, which is always good. All right, and so now you just make up the share folder. We'll call it for video. And now we get to say what the local cache size is. And so to really test this and get this working, I'm gonna just do 20 gigabytes. That way I don't have to absolutely destroy my internet trying to test this. You know what, actually we're gonna do 2 gigabytes just because I have very slow internet. Oh, and it's gotta be more than 300 gigabytes. Whoops, well, this actually might be slightly hard to test because it's gonna take a while for all this to be synced up, but I might just leave this running and we might see this video later on today. And we have the rest of the shared folder things, recycling bins and things like that. And so now we're just going to create it. And I will give my SMB user access. And so now we get this new cloud icon right here. And it's checking the connection for the server. And so now it says connected. And so now let's go ahead and try mounting it and seeing what we can do. So I'm just going to go into Finder here. And I'm going to go ahead and mount the share. All right, and so now we've got this hybrid share folder. So now we're going to have to start jam packing this with some files due to the fact that it takes up 300 gigabytes of local cache. And so I need to add in more storage than that to this. So I'm going to find some files to upload. And I believe I actually have some in another shared folder. So we actually might be able to just go into DSM and do that copy there. So I believe in main. Yep, I've got 1.2 terabytes. So I'm going to go ahead and start setting that up. So I'm going to go into File Station. And so under main, I'm going to go ahead and copy over some of these files. Let's see here. I want to get maybe like 500 gigs. All right, so I found probably like 600 gigs worth of files. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those over. And we are going to copy them to that hybrid share. And this is going to take a while because they're also then going to have to upload to our C2 storage. So this is going to take a while. Also, it's only one disk. And so it's really going to be quite slow. So honestly, this video might be best suited for stopping now and going over later. We're also already seeing right here in traffic settings, right here, we're already getting some upload speeds, and that is going to be from our internet usage. And so if we go into Resource Monitor, nobody's accessing these files. And so all the network speed is actually going to be uploaded on our internet, which is going to be really taking up. This figure right here for the network upload, you can't give it fault for being slow because I think that's actually probably my fault. I have terrible upload capacity for my internet, which is unfortunate. So yeah, like whenever I post these 4K videos, uploading can take like 2.5 hours. It's really quite fun. But yeah, it is going to take a really long time. And so honestly, this video might actually just get posted next week. So I might have a different shirt on and a bunch of other things because this is going to take quite a while to upload and really test. All right, well, now we're gonna do a flash forward and you'll see me in the future probably. All right, so now I'm finally back. That took so long to upload the first time. To be fair, I do not have very good upload internet capacity here, but at the same time, it was capped to about 1 megabyte per second. Now this is a number of things. This honestly could be my own router actually making sure that the rest of my network has enough upload capacity, and so I really don't get slowed down. It could be Synology throttling for the beta program. It could be a whole lot of things, but it was not a fast upload speed. Don't take that necessarily as this is a bad thing, because quite frankly, my test environment is not good enough. If you have something like fiber symmetric gigabit internet, you probably are going to be able to upload very quickly, and it's not going to be nearly as much of a problem. But at my home with my poor upload speed, it definitely was slow. I think I've only got about 20 megabytes up, and so it is very slow for uploads. You would not believe how long YouTube upload videos take. But the initial upload was capped to about 1 megabyte per second, and it took about 2 weeks for 600 gigs. It took so long, I got a haircut. But now we're up and rolling. And so I do want to go over a couple of things that I found. So I did find, interestingly enough, the maximum upload file size is only 64 gigabytes, which I get why they're doing that because otherwise you're going to have a really slow write. If you had like a 100 gigabyte file, trying to access that over the network and having that download take so long, it honestly could cause SMB to just hang because your computer's like, I've given you half an hour. Why do you not have this file? Well, not half an hour, but I've given you 10 minutes. You should have had this file by now. That means the server's probably crashed and probably would go through and start giving crash messages and things like that. And so that's probably why they did that 64 gigabyte file. And at the same time, it's also not going to be a good experience for files larger than that. So I definitely see why they did this. The point of this is not to upload media files like I've done here. The real point of this is in Office, where you can be sharing tons and tons of small text files that changes can propagate like that, because they're only like kilobyte uploads whenever you change a few things on a file. It is using BTRFS's delta calculations to figure out how files have changed. And so if you change 1 megabyte of a 10 megabyte file, it should only be uploading that 1 megabyte that has changed. That is very hard to calculate, but if they can do it, it will save a ton of internet access, because every time you save a file, it actually resaves the entire thing. And that's actually why it can be really slow, especially where you're saving a big file over and over and over again, and it's got to keep finding different places to put that file. So in this test, I am going to be uploading an 80 gigabyte file just to see what happens with it. And we're also going to go ahead and test out some of the caching capabilities. I'm actually right now transferring a very large file size to my home computer to make sure that it is in cache for this test. And so I'm going to go ahead and try to find a slower one, and we can look and try to really figure out how this is going to work. Remember, this is going to be a bit of a worst case scenario because of my poor internet, but it should really give a demonstration for what it can do. One thing I wish I could test, and I really need to figure out how to do this, is to have a separate NAS also sync to this, because really that's the entire point of this, is to have multiple NASs with multiple offices all connected, all having the exact same shared folder without needing all the data on that folder. And so really that's the biggest purpose to have this. And so I do wish I could test that out, and I'll probably try to do a follow-up video on that once I really get into the business use cases for Synology and be able to really test that with 2 NASs and try to edit files and see how long they take to sync. One other thing I want to talk about in Synology's what is the local cache in hybrid share is the evicting, and specifically that throttling that I saw. So if any given upload takes more than 50% of the local cache size, i.e. what I did there in that video, basically hybrid share starts to throttle the speed written to it, but not completely throttle it. And the read speeds are unaffected, which is important. So basically it'll start to throttle you because it knows, hey, I don't have a lot of buffer left, and we got to make sure all these files are successfully uploaded and so that everything can stay in sync. And so they say, okay, you can have the regular read speeds, but your write speeds, we're going to start slowing down. Then if you continue on to get 60%, which is really only going to happen if you're doing huge file uploads and huge shifts, it's actually really going to throttle you down. And from my testing, it is going to throttle you basically to the upload speed. And so that way it only stays about 60% of the total capacity for an upload file. And that's as far as I could tell, and that's what happened to me. So at the end of my transfer, once I had really filled up that volume, filled 60% of it up, from that 300 gigabytes I started with, then it goes, okay, we gotta get this data into the cloud first before you can upload any more data. And so what it was doing is it was throttling the write speeds to the exact same of what the upload was. And so one thing I was really happy that I did was I actually transferred it from within DSM. The files were all already on my NAS, and I just transferred them into the hybrid share folder. That meant that I could just walk away, I could turn off my computer, I could do everything, but DSM would keep transferring those files, which I would really recommend doing first time. If you have slower upload capacity and you're doing a huge transfer up like I just did there, I would highly recommend basically first transferring them to a regular volume and then dumping them using DSM into that hybrid share volume. This way you can walk away from it, and if SMB dies on your computer turns off, or it just hangs because SMB generally does not work great if it's been connected for weeks with transferring, then you're still going to be okay because the files will be transferring from within DSM. So that's just from my findings. If you have really fast like symmetric gigabit connection, you're probably going to be fine because it's going to go so much quicker, like 100 times quicker. But if you are like me, that is something I would really recommend doing because it can make your life a lot easier. And one other thing down here that I did want to mention right here is the versioning. Basically, Synology does not recommend that you use this hybrid share also as a Synology drive if you're going to be enabling versioning on the drive. Well, they don't necessarily say you shouldn't. They basically just say, hey, if you do this, you're going to basically be doubling your size roughly if you have a lot of versions. That's because every version of the file actually has to be saved locally, and then Synology uses BTRFS to also save it in the C2 cloud. So basically you're doubling down on your cache because, hey, now it's got to hold all the versions, but in reality, all the versions are also stored in the cloud. And so realistically, that's because Synology set up Drive without actually using BTRFS. They actually use their own implementation of being able to do snapshots. And so it's not that file system level snapshots that make it so easy to use. And so we don't get the benefit, if you enable Drive on this, of having the snapshots be communicated between Drive and C2. Instead, Drive will make all the snapshots and C2 will go, well, those are files, I'll snapshot them. And so you do kind of double down on the amount of storage you need. But if you did want to use this as a Drive location, you could instead use the snapshots that are within C2 if you wanted to. Or if you're like, you know what, honestly, I'm only using maybe 300 or 400 gigabytes anyway, I may as well just enable snapshots in Drive because it's a lot easier for me. You can also do that too. It's really up to however you utilize your NAS and what is important to you. All right, and so now I did want to go into Synology C2, and so that way you could actually see what was happening here. So as you can see right here, it's the hybrid share beta, and basically says the number of connected devices and what those devices are. But unfortunately, it is not like the hyper backup where you could actually access the files here. I was actually really hoping we'd be able to access the files through this portal as well, which would be an awesome solution for if you're on the road and if you really want to do things and be able to, hey, I'm remote, I don't need to log into a NAS. Instead, I can log directly into Synology C2. Though the more I think about it, I totally understand why Synology did this. Because if Synology had done this, that would be a big security risk to a lot of companies. Because something like this is just waiting to get broken into, and something insecure. Your employees might accidentally leave a computer logged in with their credentials, or anything like that. And so by having it locked out, and so you can only use these authorized NASs to get your files, it does give it a more secure front at least. In the back end, they both are technically exposed to the internet and theoretically could get hacked, but this is just one less vector that somebody could attack it, especially because you can't just use employee credentials to break in. If you could use employee credentials, your employees probably don't have a lot of different passwords, and I bet password 123 is at least one of their passwords, and then your entire company's data is at risk because somebody could just go, oh, I'll download the entire thing. By having it forced onto a NAS, there is an additional level of security by really only allowing admin accounts there. So I do see why they did this. All right, and so now let's go ahead and go into tutorial and actually let's see this. And so now we can go into File Station and let's check out this share. And so we can see right here that basically this looks identical to every other shared folder in Synology, except we can see this cloud icon right here. One thing I have found to be kind of unfortunate is you can't really tell what is stored in the cloud and what is local. I did purposefully download this to my computer to make sure that it was in local cache storage, and so now we can go ahead and just mount it as an SMB drive so we can really see it. So I've just done that here, and so here's the SMB drive, and I know for a fact that T7 Touch for Review is downloaded, and so I can easily just copy it to my desktop, and it's going to basically copy at the full speed of the NAS. And so if we give it a minute and go back in, we can see that it is reading at the full speed of a gigabit connection. It does seem to take an extra minute, and I believe that's actually because it is first doing communication with Synology C2 to say, hey, somebody wants this file. Real quick, can you just make sure that nothing's changed? I believe that's what is happening because I've definitely noticed the transfers are not as snappy. When you're doing a large transfer, normally I would get the full 110 megabytes per second as soon as you copied it over. But I found with Synology C2, when I'm doing very large transfers, it takes 10 seconds to really get up that full rate. And I think because it's doing a confirmation. And so just like that, it'll copy over at the full speed of my NAS, which is an awesome thing. But now let's try and figure out something that is not like that. So we're gonna try this one right here, and I'm just gonna copy that in. And so now you can see it is going really slow. So now let's go in and let's see what's happening. So if we look at my network activity, we see something interesting. It is both uploading and downloading at the exact same 3.2 megabytes per second. So what that tells me is that basically none of this was on the local cache, and we can even see that here. It is not doing any reads, but only doing writes. And so essentially what this is doing is it is the version where there's nothing in cache and I've got to download it all from Synology C2. And so for most people, these are going to be very small files, so hopefully it would take a couple seconds. But it seems like SMB handles it pretty well. One thing I was worried about happening was that since the transfer would take a very long time to get initiated, that my computer would go, hey, something's wrong, and throw an error. But in reality, it seems as though this is just working pretty well, and my computer's not spit out any errors, and it all feels like I am transferring something just from a NAS. Now, in this case, a very slow NAS, but it is not the huge latency that I've experienced opening things up over WebDAV share when I'm across the world. And so it does feel a lot more snappy than that. And so you can definitely see the performance. They've definitely already cached all the folders. And then in the file system, they go, hey, if we need those files, we'll grab them real quick. But those are your transfer rates. And so what you're probably going to get about for transfer speeds is basically what your download capacity is. If you've got a gigabit download connection, I've not been able to test this, you're probably going to get some really fast download speeds. This is pretty much in line with my internet capacity, though it does sometimes dip below. Overall though, it does seem to work really well. I'm pretty impressed by that. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and cancel this. And so now I'll just go ahead and delete that. But overall, there's no really way to tell what is actually downloaded and what is not, at least not anything that I've found. It really just does that smart caching to say, hey, these are things that people are using and we'll keep those in storage. And for corporate networks, where certain teams are in certain offices, this is probably going to be very, very effective. I'd say in most cases, your teams are probably going to be accessing 95% the same files all the time. And so getting by with only 300 gigabytes probably means you're very rarely going to be pulling from cache, depending on your office environment. So for that, it could be very efficient depending on your workflow. One thing I did want to test was what happens if you try to upload a file, a single file, that is greater than that 64 gigabytes. And I'm going to try to do it via SMB. And so I've got this video file right here, how to protect your NAS. And this is the full 84 or 81 gigabyte giant file. And I'm just going to try to copy it in and see what happens. And so interestingly enough, it seems to allow it to copy. I'll go ahead and see if DSM says anything about it. But yeah, we are getting the full gigabit connection to it right now. And so it's not had any problems whatsoever. All right, and so while that's taking its nice sweet time, I also want to go over and show you how you can see some important attributes of the upload. And so basically, if you want to see what's going on with the hybrid share, you just go into Control Panel, Shared Folder, select it, and so here you can see, hey, it's connected, hybrid share, and you just do this drop tick, and you can start to see all the different attributes about it. And so you can see your upload queue. That's basically the changes that need to be uploaded into C2. And you can also see how long it's taking and what speed you're going at for this. So it's really great for that, as well as even what your local cache usage is. And so once your local cache usage gets to 90%, it basically starts to evict data that has not been used recently, the least recently used data to be exact. And so then, according to the documentation at least, once it gets to 95% usage, this would be a case where the delete is taking too long and you're getting too much data in there. To make sure it doesn't get to 100% and really cause issues, it basically starts to throttle both the read and the write speeds. This is most likely so that Synology can make sure that stuff gets deleted without more stuff being downloaded. And that's actually probably why they're throttling the read speeds, which in theory should not have any problem. And so now we're getting to that 98% usage in a second here. So we're gonna see what happens. And so as soon as it hit 90% usage, it deleted the files immediately. I was actually very impressed by how quick that was. I'm wondering, since it's BTRFS, it was a, hey, yeah, it was deleted, but not actually deleted until the file system had time to take care of everything. But basically, as soon as that hit 90%, it deleted, 15% of the data that was least recently used. It seemed to be an exact 15%, which is surprising to me, because I would think that it would delete entire files, so it would not be an exact amount. So it would be like, okay, I'm gonna keep deleting files until I get down to 75%, but say that last file is 4 gigs. Well, maybe you're actually at 74% then. And somehow our upload queue just got reset. So, that is not good. Okay, so it did error. It did error. Basically it said, hey, an unexpected error occurred right at 68 gigabytes. So that's really probably why there's that 64 gigabyte limit in there. I'm not sure if that is Synology imposed or it's a bug and they go, well, we'll call the maximum file size 64 gigabytes and then it'll be fixed. But it definitely did not allow us to upload that extra bit. And now when I hit OK, we're going to see that that file was removed. Unfortunately, it does not tell the end user, you're uploading a file that's more than 64 gigabytes. What are you doing? This is not going to work. It instead just lets you get to 64, in this case a little bit more, and then errors. So I wish it was able to go, hey, you're trying to upload too large of a file. We're just not gonna let that happen. But I'm not sure if you can even really implement that within the SMB protocol. And it could also cause issues where a file is less than the limit, but for whatever reason, it registers maybe having a little bit more space than it should. And so it could be that. And maybe that's why they did not implement it. But for sure, once it got past 64 gigabytes, SMB said, nope, we're not transferring this, and it killed it. At least it told the end user, and the end user knew that the transfer failed, so there is that. And that is just going to be a limitation of using Synology Share Sync. I would not expect that to be a big concern for most people. For the most part, there are very few industries that are going to be making single files that are greater than 64 gigabytes. I'd say it's mostly in the engineering, science fields, or in the videography fields. Photographers, I would be shocked if we ever got over 50 gigabytes, though maybe if you're doing a ton in Photoshop, you might. But for the most part, I think most people, especially offices that we're talking about here, that is not going to be a big deal to. And so I think overall, this could be an absolute awesome feature for large companies who need to have a lot of different sites, all having access to the files, but also access to all the files without having to store all of it locally. It really gives you the flexibility of having on-prem storage while also being able to have the advantage of the cloud where you can have as much storage as you want in there and everybody can access it from wherever. So I think overall Synology's implementation is actually pretty good. I do need to test some additional functionality of it, but overall I think they did a good job, especially for the first take at it. I think overall the upload speeds being terrible was on my end because of my poor internet, but overall I think for offices with gigabit internet, especially symmetric gigabit internet, this should be ultra usable. And so I'm really excited to see how Synology implements this in the future because for certain users, this could be a lifesaver. All right, well, that's gonna be it for this tutorial. Go ahead and leave any of the tutorials, especially Synology DSM-7 ones, in the comments below, and have a good one. Bye.